And one thing I always say is if you keep breaking yourself into bits and pieces just to fit in different spaces, then you're broken into pieces. You're not enough.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Conversation with your host Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you've had a good week. And I also hope that you've been enjoying the sample episodes of Coffee Break. I think there have been, no, not that I think, I know. There have been 4 episodes so far. Yesterday, there was a coffee break with Eze Cosby talking about his new novel, King of Ashes. Last week, there was a coffee break episode with Lola J. Then we had, who did we have? Oh, we had Rod Reynolds. And then we started with Helen Monkstacker. And coffee breaks are going to be 30-minute episodes. Initially, I said 20, but I do talk a lot and I try. So roughly they're about half an hour, which I think is a good length of time to sit down, listen to me talking to an author you know, or maybe an author you don't know. Enough time to you to sit and listen, learn about their new book while you're drinking your coffee or having your tea or, I don't know, eating a packet of crisps. I don't know, whatever you choose to do in your coffee break. But I think these are really good episodes. You learn about the author, learn about their new books. And in season 4 of The Conversation, which will start in September, coffee breaks will be a regular feature. And another feature of the coffee break episode is going to be listener questions. And what I want to do is put listener questions to the authors. So what I want you to be thinking about over the summer, I want you to think about all the questions that you would love to ask an author. And what I will try and do is prior to my recording of a coffee break episode, I will tell you who I'm going to be talking to and you can put your questions to me and I will put them to the author. You will get a shout out and it's happy days all around. So I'm going to leave it there about my little love fest for coffee breaks because I really enjoyed them and I hope that you're enjoying them too. Now let's get on with the show. In today's episode, I'm in conversation with author Lola Akinmade, whose new novel, Bitter Honey, is out now. And in our conversation, Lola and I talk about the struggles of pursuing creative dreams, the importance of being seen and heard, and finding strength after life's unexpected turns. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Lola Akinmade, welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. Because Lola, right, when I was on your website and I was like, this woman is a lot of things. You're down as an author, photographer, what else? Speaker, mentor, and idlist, which I like. So my first question for you is, how would you describe Lola?
That's a great one. And I do get that question quite a bit. I just describe myself as a storyteller. And so the platform and the medium doesn't matter. It's the story that I'm trying to tell, right? And that's why you see me either as a photographer or writing articles, travel writing or novelist or all these things. It's because if I have a story to tell, I then figure out what's the best way of telling the story. Sometimes it's maybe through a painting. Sometimes it's maybe through photography or words. So that's how I describe myself.
When did you know that you could tell stories though? Because I always think that, especially when it comes to writers, I always say a lot of people know you can have the skill of writing, but I think it's a completely different medium knowing that you can tell a story. So when did you know you could do that?
It was maybe when I was 9 or 10, because I used to, look at all these different magazines, look at the people, wonder what their lives were about, then cut out their pictures and then write stories about the lives I think they were having.
Really?
So that's what I used to do, yes. And then when I went to boarding school, between 10 and 15, I used to write short stories and I used to I call my own little library where I filled up notebooks with short stories and then I had a sign out sheet. So my friends would check them out and check them back in for the next friend to read. So I think that's kind of how I knew is I always looked at those pictures, those people, and wondered what their lives were. And if I didn't know, how about I create what I thought it was? And then I did that. And so on those books, I actually had those photos stick like labeled and attached to the books, actually, those photos from the magazines.
It's so, when you look at children and you see their creativity, and it's just so important just to let them just like fly with it and not stifle it. Because look at you sitting there, 9 years old, putting your books together and then creating your own library and then bringing your friends on board for them to loan out, to borrow the books. And I think back to myself, I always say when I was like 9, I was always doing I called them my little projects. So I'd sit there with my notebook and write my little project. Now, so no one's asking for these projects, but I just used to write these projects. And they could be anything. They could be like stories, or it could be, because I loved history, even young. So like I'll do my own research with the big, massive encyclopedia and I'll do my own research and pull it in these notebooks. And my parents just left me to it.
And it's very important, I think for you it was history. I think for me it was geography. I loved maps and was always, I think that's why I also ended up as a travel writer and photographer. I was always looking at maps, wondering, again, what other people were doing in those little boundaries we draw around each other, right?
Yeah.
And so human geography was always something that pulled me. So yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely relate.
I think when you're a creative person, I think whatever your medium is, you're always asking questions. Because when I was going through your website, I was looking at the photographs and I wrote it down. This question popped into my head and I said to myself, do you think that you ask questions through your photos, the photographs that you take?
Mm. So it really depends, right? So I always say, because I also have fine art photography and travel photography. Fine art photography is the one that asks questions. So that's why you look at a painting or you look at a photograph and say, I wonder what the artist was thinking. And you try to deduce. Travel photography actually gives you all the answers in a single epic photo. So you say, oh my goodness, I see it. I get everything. The time of day, the why, the what, all of that. So it really depends on what I'm trying to communicate. Am I trying to say, this photo, I want to leave it up to interpretation? Then that will be more of my fine art photography. Or with travel photography, it gives you all the answers in one single image. And I said the stronger, how you can tell if your photo is quite strong, especially as a travel photographer, is if it gives you all the answers in a single image. That's very different from fine art photography that wants you to figure out what the artist is trying to do.
It's so funny because, we're all taking photos like every minute of the day. And, there was a time when you had to put work into taking a photo. You had to go and find your camera, take the photograph, and then you had no idea if the photograph was any good or not until you got them back. And then I just remember the amount of money I spent on photographs and picking them up. Yeah. And they've all got the sticker on them because they're out of focus or they're blurred.
Exactly.
But now everyone considers themselves a photographer.
Absolutely. But that also gives, I used to start with film as well. And I can remember there was a time I went, one of my earlier trips to Iceland with all film, and I lost all those rolls of film through like a scanning machine. And that was the first time I saw the Northern Lights. So I get it where so I get it where you don't have many chances. You have, especially like with film, you have, this is the ISO, you're shooting at 400. That's all you have. You have to be intentional about what you shoot. Even now with the cameras I usually take fixed lenses so I can zoom, right?
Yeah.
So I'm intentional about creating the shot. And so even though we say that, well, everybody's a photographer now, most of us that work as professional photographers, we actually aren't threatened by that. It's actually letting people explore their creativity, and there's a T-shirt that I think is quite funny that says everybody's a photographer unless they have to switch to manual. Yeah. I thought that was really cool. But honestly, I'm from the other camp where I feel like if it's helping people see the world differently, if it's helping people tap into their creativity, I don't think I think that's a good thing to some
Yeah.
extent. But there are those of us that obviously work on it, that do this professionally. We know all the settings, we know what to do. We can't just go into a setting and just rely on luck. We actually have to go in knowing that this is how we're going to be able to create the image.
Do you think people are like less intentional then with their art when you just have it? It's in your hand, and
Yes.
it's less about capturing the moment as opposed to creating like a
Mhm.
perfect moment.
Correct. And I think that's where you can start telling. I think that's when you can really start telling who does work with intention and who is just taking a photo just because it's pretty, right?
Mm,
And that's why I say it doesn't matter if everybody's taking photos, because it's easy for me to see if a photographer is moving through their craft with intention.
mm. Do you feel the same way about your writing?
Everything I do is intentional and in a good way. And I think that's all tied to my purpose, because I'm grateful to have found out my purpose on a very early on, very early on. And so everything I do connects to that, right? So my
Mm,
purpose really is about cultural connection. How can we get to know each other better, understand each other better? And how can I fight isolation and exclusion within my own sphere of influence? So every story, everything I do, I post is kind of tied to that. How can I bring us one step closer by fostering understanding? How can I do that by having the difficult conversations, right? How can I do that by letting you see yourself in me reflected back? So everything I do in that sense is just tied organically to that purpose, whether it's writing or photography or whatever.
mm. Did you ever feel that, I don't know, with any like hesitancy in pursuing your craft and like your talent? Because I was thinking, I think I was listening to something yesterday, and it was all about, you know, embracing your talent and pushing through with it, no matter how difficult, the circumstances may be around it. And then sometimes we can stop ourselves because we say to ourselves, oh, maybe this isn't for me, or people like me don't do this. Were there any times like you had doubts about that?
In the beginning, when I was younger, but then the minute I stopped seeking external validation, then
Mm,
it didn't matter, right? I think when we're young, we want to prove to the world, see, I'm talented, see, I can do this, I can do all that. But then you get all the rejections, or people don't really care, or people are threatened, by your talent. And so once you stop kind of seeking that external validation and focusing on what you do, it might be a challenging road, but you already have something else driving you. So you're going to be able to push through those challenges, right? One
mm,
of the things I always say is I don't focus on staying relevant. I focus on the next evolution of who I'm supposed to be, right? Because if I focus on I must stay relevant, then I am beholden to trends. I'm beholden to more external factors than focusing on, okay, Lola, maybe this is not working at this time in your life. Maybe you need to transition to the next stage of your life as a storyteller, because your audience changes. They evolve with you, or the people that used to connect with you when you were younger no longer do. And you need to make space for that evolution of yourself. So, so I'm grateful that I was able to figure out what my purpose was very early on, and then kind of limiting that external validation. Because I always say, if you kind of live your life outside of people's expectations of you, then you are already impossible to ignore anyway, because they're like, who the hell is that person not
yeah.
living to what she should be doing? So whether it's negative or positive, you're already gonna um, get that. People are gonna figure, find out about you anyway. But it's not about that. It's about focusing on you, your craft, and your why. Why are you doing this?
Mm. But it's so difficult for some people to do because they're continuously, and I wrote about this yesterday, funny enough, on my Substack. They're continuously looking at what's going on around them. So they are looking at the trends. They are looking at people who, you know, all they're seeing is surface. So all they are seeing is that, oh, they've got the deal and they've got the publicity campaign and they've got the #1 bestseller status. And because they're constantly looking at that, and then it kind of diminishes and devalues how they feel and what they should be doing. And then it stops them.
I mean, we're human, right? We're not
Yeah.
robots. We're human after all. And that's what I call rubbernecking. When you're looking at somebody that's in a totally different part in your life, so you rubberneck, it's kind of like moving past a car crash and you're just looking until you hit the car in front of you, right? That is what we need to start doing is, okay, I'm seeing all this person's accolades. I'm seeing all this person's, curated good stuff. They're on a different part in life than I am.
Yeah.
What's my own life? What's my own race? What's my own shine? Is it? And I think a lot of people, I was talking to my daughter recently, and she said, "Mom, she said she would like to be wealthy without fame." Right? And I said, "Okay, I get that. You want to
I
be
get that.
silently powerful, silently thriving, but nobody knows your name." I think most people, I would love to do that. It's just silently thriving, and people don't have to know you physically. So I think, again, it depends on what you're looking for. What are you looking for? Because it's easy to look and see somebody having all this fame and like, do you really, really, truly want that kind of uh, visibility? Because it also comes with its own set of negativity. It comes with this feeling of, I always have to perform. And having that, one of the things that I'm grateful for is that, and I always tell my friends, is that I can still play on social media, right? Which means I have been myself from the beginning to right now so that I can post whatever I want. I am not so curated to the point where I can't even post a ridiculous meme because the world is holding me to a different, you see what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
can
I need to a
post
different
whatever.
standard. Yeah.
Right. And I think there are many authors that have cornered themselves in that box of saying, this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to be seen. This is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to hold the space, that they've actually cornered themselves where now they can't even play or say anything or just fully be themselves, even if they want to. And so for me, I think that's a privilege to just show up as yourself and to stay as yourself. Those that connect with you will, but make sure that you are not showing up within other people's frameworks of who you're supposed to be as an author.
Yeah. I always find it interesting. People have always said to me, oh, that I curate my and they don't mean it in a negative way, but they're like in a positive way. Like, oh, how I curate my Instagram. And I'm like, I don't curate it. I just post whatever I want to post. Because I said I haven't boxed myself in the corner. I think the only limit like I place on myself in terms of what I post on social media is that I think there are limits to my private life. Like I feel like you don't need to see every single thing. Like you don't need you really don't need to see what I had for breakfast and how I'm feeling about my neighbor. Like you don't need to know about that. Like I could tell my friends and family about that, but I don't need to post it. But in terms of but I don't think I don't feel like I think I'm trying to say like consciously or intentionally like curate it to create an image, a certain image of me. I think what you see on social media is basically what you will see in person.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's key, And I looked at like Viola Davis, incredible actress. She posts some of the most ridiculous memes. I love it. That you can just be all of yourself, and that's more than enough. That's more than enough, And so that I think is super important.
Yeah. It just reminded me, I posted it wasn't even a meme. It was a clip from The Simpsons. I can't remember the character's name singing this song. And it's just the most ridiculous thing, but I think it's just so reflective of my sense of humor, because every time I see it, it just cracks me up. And when I posted it, like my brother and my friends are like, this is so you. Only you would just like post it. I'm like, because it's funny. I want
Yeah,
to
no,
laugh.
absolutely. The internet is like the bastion of like, you know, it's like an abyss of nonsense, but I'm
Oh God,
glad
yeah.
and grateful. But I'm glad and grateful it gave us memes. That I'm grateful for. So, yeah.
I think like anything, 'cause I said this yesterday, you have to find your space within the madness of the internet and the madness of social media. And you need to work out what works best for you. Like what platform works best for you, what platform most likely reflects your personality better. And I think
Mm,
once you've done
yeah.
that, you can kind of navigate the waters better. Because I always see people, and I'm very cynical. I need to like stop being so cynical and rolling my eyes at things. But when I see people and they're like, oh, all I'm seeing is X, Y, and Z on my post. But I'm like, that's because you're seeing that because that's what you've seeked. Like you've looked
Mm,
out for that. So
yes.
if you
Yeah.
change your direction, you'll see something different.
Mm, No, absolutely. And even just in terms of people placing value
Mm,
on um what social media tells them. So for example, like there are lots of people, some incredible artists with very few follow accounts, right? And there
yeah.
are those that have like, thousands or millions. And that doesn't, just because you have a lower follow account, that doesn't devalue you or that doesn't define your value as an artist. Or, there was one brand, it was actually a destination once. And before I got my follow account, which is still kind of low, up a little bit, they said, oh, they can't work with me because my follow account was 3,000 less than what they wanted. And I said, oh, really? So if I went and bought 3,000
Well,
followers, then that all of a sudden, that means I can work with you. Of course, I didn't do that, but they were quiet because I showed them how absurd it was, where
yeah.
they said, well, you're the same person, but because you don't have this number, then we can work with you. And I'm like, well, so if I just went and bought those numbers, then you can work with me?
It's
I
it's
didn't,
so
but
it's
it's
so
stupid.
artificial. Yeah, it's stupid and
Yes,
it's artificial. Because
yes.
even when I think about um like back on the days, like on old on Twitter, and then before
Yes.
Twitter then turned
I
into
know.
X and went silly.
Correct.
And I can't remember. I think I didn't have a massive following number. I think it was like 5,000 in
Mm,
change
yes.
on followers, but the engagement was almost zero, almost
Mm,
zero.
yeah.
And it's like, well, there's no point having this large follower number and
Mm,
you're not getting anything from it. And then
mm,
when I went to Blue Sky, it's I think it's 7,500 on Blue Sky, but the engagement is there. And on
yes.
Substack, it's low because I'm just
Mm,
growing it organically. But even though it's low, I get more engagement on that in comparison to Threads or Blue Sky combined. And so you
no,
just have to weigh
absolutely.
it up. What you like, what are you looking for? Is it the perception?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also, who is the audience? So even if I go somewhere and I post about this trip and I say,
Mm.
oh, check out this, I don't know, luxury place or Four Seasons, whatever, the CEOs that follow me are not going to be on my Instagram leaving comments like, they may
No.
just send me a direct email saying, oh, this was cool. I saw this. Can you connect me? Right. And that's a direct sale or direct return on investment. So again, it's who is the audience? Who are you trying to reach? What's the sphere of influence? I think that's a bit more important than just like the vanity matrix, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's what I'm quite laid back about engagement, not engagement with followers. I'm like, if it grows, oh, that's nice. Someone's following me. If it remains the
yes,
same for 6 weeks, well, it remains the same for 6 weeks. I'm not,
exactly, exactly,
yeah, it doesn't, what am I trying to say? Like, it doesn't define me. Like, my whole existence is not
exactly,
dependent on and doesn't validate me either
exactly.
as an author.
And that gets back to our point where, you know, imagine when the algorithm always changes. I see people freaking out because it has
Yeah.
defined fully. And I said, just once you know, when it comes to friends, I always say you shouldn't swim in friends. You should surf friends. Friends are like the ocean with riptides that can drag you in and drown you. If you surf, at least you have some control of what part of the trend you want to use and how you want to
Mm,
move with the trend. Because for me, it's all about longevity in the industry, about staying true to your voice, maturing your voice, as a storyteller, so that when the ebbs and the flows come, it doesn't fully knock you out because
yeah.
this is why you do the things you do.
I mean, it's a hard, I mean, I say this creative life, it's not an easy life to
Oh, I know.
pursue.
I mean, well, I know because, before I became a creative, I used to be in IT. I used to be a system architect and a programmer.
Oh, were you?
So, yeah,
I didn't
so
know
that's
that.
like nose diving from security and financial stability into
Hmm.
like the mucky waters of starving artist mode. Like, so I get it. That was quite the swan dive. But yeah, that was my life. I used to be a system architect into something called GIS, which is the Geographic Information System, like Google Maps,
Yeah.
essentially programming interactive maps. And that was my life for many years before I took that giant leap into this kind of uncertain world of creativity. So I get it.
What was it that made you take the leap? Because I always say that there's always some event that causes that it's a catalyst for the pivot in
Yes.
your
Yeah. No, I
life.
knew. No, it was
Yeah.
very clear for me because I mean, obviously, when I was younger, I loved geography, writing, but it was in 2002. So I'm dating myself. That's many years ago. 2002.
It doesn't
I
seem that
got.
long ago though. I'm
Why
not
no?
gonna
Right?
lie.
2002. Like that was like over 20 years ago. Lord.
I
Uh,
know, but it doesn't feel that long.
I know it's crazy. No, but I volunteered with an expedition race in Fiji. So I was in Fiji for 3 weeks with this expedition race on their web team. So my job essentially was to write stories about Fiji, about the competition, about the competitors, what was going on, and put that on the website so people around the world could follow and see what's going on,
Hmm.
and writing about the villages and the seascape and the culture and all of that. And so it was that moment where I was like, wait a minute, I'm writing from this incredible place. I'm writing stories. I am the eyes and the ears and the feet of the people around the world, experiencing what's going on through me. I think this is what I want to do. This is incredible. This is such a privilege to be able to do this. So I knew then in that moment that I wanted to come back and become a travel writer. And so I came back and started slowly kind of disconnecting away from the life of IT and moving into travel writing.
What did you say to yourself, or who did you have around you when? Because you would have had those moments when you questioned, have I made the right decision? Maybe I need to go back. But how did you get yourself through those moments?
So I'm Nigerian and whoever, it's your parents that will definitely let you know and question whether it made the right decision.
Yeah.
Because I always say, like, especially when I became a photographer, my mom was always like, remind people you have degrees. Please let them remind them. I mean, they are my biggest supporters now, but I think it's just coming, and especially being the oldest child, coming from a place where they advocate for stability and there's like
Mm,
a natural path, you go to college, you do this, and then coming and say, you know what, I want to go to Uzbekistan and take photos, and they're like, okay, and how are you going to eat? Like, where's it? So, of course, there'll be people around you, but like I said, once you have that unshakable belief in yourself, an audacious belief, even when you're scared, but still doing it anyway,
mm.
um, I'm just grateful to be able to do that. And I think I realized that really, really early on when I was young that this is what I'm supposed to be doing is telling stories, traveling and sharing the world from my own view as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So going back to storytelling, how would you describe your writing journey?
say it's obviously non-linear, up and down. I
Mm,
think once I left IT, I became a travel writer, which meant I was writing more kind of creative non or narrative non-fiction, meaning um, just kind of what I was experiencing, all the transformational journeys. So my writing as a travel writer is quite different from my
yeah.
writing as a novelist. My travel writing is more literary in the way it comes across. My travel writing is more, the prose is more direct and raw, and it's by choice. And the reason is because my work as a travel writer is what has helped me as a novelist and the way I write. Because when I talk about going to experience a place, for example, Italy or wherever, Croatia, as a travel writer, I can't just tell you Croatia is beautiful, go visit it. I have to show you through words, through what I'm
Mm.
eating, through what I'm feeling, seeing, all my senses, why Croatia is incredible. And you need to go, you as the reader needs to deduce that from my writing. So that's what I bring into my work as a novelist. And that's why my prose is quite straightforward and raw in the sense that it's just kind of describing, putting you in the shoes of the characters, putting you in the shoes of the characters so that you can feel and understand them that way.
You know, when you started writing your first book, so I'm talking about Every Mirror, She's Black. How did you, I'm trying to find the right way to pull it, but how did you know that this was the right story for you to tell?
So when I wanted to get back into fiction writing, I actually struggled because I was like,
Mm,
I used to write really well when I was younger, but why can't I write fiction again? But then I realized the stories I needed to write are closer to my own lived experience.
mm,
I needed to look closer because then you've got the experience, you've got the insight, you've got just life leading you in
mm.
many ways. And so with In Every Mirror She's Black, which is about Black women in Sweden, that's my lived experience. I'm not characters like to a T, just sprinkles, in some of them, but I'm a Black woman in Sweden. I'm a travel writer. I've spent time volunteering at a refugee center, working with them. I have friends across the social economic spectrum. These were stories that were closer to
Mm.
my life. And so they were easier to tease out and pull experiences. And then the way I write as a novelist is I actually spend a lot of time with the characters in my head before I actually get to writing because I can spend 4 to 5 months just mulling out, creating them as people in my head, giving them characters and attributes, so that when I write, the writing actually takes a shorter amount of time because the characters can lead me where they want to go because they're like people. I know this person isn't going to act
Yeah.
this way in this situation, right? So that's kind of how I knew with In Every Mirror She's Black. And I knew there were three themes I needed to tackle, which was career, culture, and class. So once I knew those themes, then I created the characters to kind of fit those themes. So Kemi for career, Brittany for class, and Muna and Yasmin for culture.
Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. So you have your debut novel and it's a success, like ridiculous, runaway success. What did that success of that book teach you?
Mhm. That success needs to be talked about in context to its struggles, right? Because
Mm.
I had over 70 rejections for that book, and that's because
70.
7-0. In fact, my friends were like, "Are there that many publishers in business? We had no idea." So we just
Seven
stopped count
zero.
7-0. So we just stopped counting. We just stopped counting. So it's probably much more. And there were so many different reasons for all of that. Many of it were I was centering Black women in the Nordics. And a lot of the editors did not want that because the Nordics is kind of like the last bastion of whiteness. And so for me to center Black women in that, they were not having that, right?
Oh,
But
so
then
where did they want
also,
them? I know I
yeah, it was
interrupt you,
just like
but
no, 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 the Nordics, no, Alexander Skarsgård is for us. You cannot put the women in there and and center them. So there was a lot of that. So there was a lot of that. There was like, oh, we cannot connect with these women. The same people that can connect with vampires and sexy aliens and whatever, couldn't connect with the women. So so, so there was so much rejection. But I knew that it was just a gatekeeping because I knew that the story was going to resonate because it was a lot of people's lived experiences. And I knew that if I could just persevere through the rejections, there was going to be one. And once that one said yes, that's why it was because it was really like a grassroots kind of success, is because
mm,
people felt validated. And because I stuck with those rejections, now I can write whatever story I want to write. I wasn't, a lot of the editors wanted, some of them wanted me to maybe dilute my voice, dilute the story, make it more feel good, make it more this. And I said, no, these are people that need to, whose stories need to be told, right? And so by going through that experience with the first book, I'm so grateful because now Bitter Honey is exactly the book I want to write. Like everything, like there are books I just want to write without that pressure of feeling like I need to dilute it for anybody.
mm. And Lola might have giggled because I'm just sitting there pulling faces because I'm like, it's the gate. I find it so irritating. It's the gatekeeping. It's the telling you the sort of, telling you should be writing this particular type of story because they haven't taken the time to invest in another form of storytelling, or hearing people from different places. It's taking time to hear about their stories. But as you said, you can resonate with vampires and gargoyles.
Yes,
It's just
easily.
easily, you don't
You
think
know,
twice about it. Oh, we'll have another
oh,
Twilight.
oh. But you know what? Also, and I think that was, I've got quite thick skin, when it comes to rejection and all of that, because I've been working as a freelancer. You have to, right?
Yeah.
But I think that was the most difficult feedback to get, is that I cannot connect with your lived experience as a fellow woman, or just as a, like, I just can't connect with you, or with those feelings, the same universal feelings, of belonging, identity, of love, lust, all of those. Those are just human, base human
Yeah.
feelings. But because it's wrapped up in a different package, you can't connect.
It's it's so many things, and it affects you differently, that form of rejection, because it's not just rejecting your book or your story, it's actually rejecting you. And it's someone saying that they don't see you. It's like,
Yes,
how can you not see me? How can you not see that we may
exactly.
share the same values and the same dreams? And we, as you said, we have the same lived experiences. It may be in a different community, but we can all resonate and understand, as you said, those feelings of possibly like being rejected, or mother-daughter
Yes,
relationships, or father-daughter
yes,
relationships, and the relationships you have with your siblings or your best friends, or going to work and feeling overlooked. It's like everyone understands that. Everyone's had some kind of experience as that, but because it comes packaged differently in the sense of how you look,
yeah.
it all of a sudden is like, no, I don't think this is going to work with our readers.
Absolutely. And I think that's the privilege of my work as a travel writer, is having spent so many time, like long periods of time with lots of different cultures, lots of different people.
Mm,
That's the base thing that we all want, is to be listened to be
yeah.
seen, to be acknowledged, and then everything just builds up from there. When you're looking into somebody's eyes and just calling them by their name, that already says, I see you, even before you just take their photo, right?
It's
So I bring all of that into, I'm grateful to bring all of that work into, my kind of art as a novelist, because of all the, the different arts. So yeah, and that's what I also brought into this book as well, Bitter Honey.
it's such a little thing, I just want to be seen and I want to be heard, but it's such a big thing, Because if you don't feel as if you're being heard or seen, you just feel like you're just disappearing into this massive world, and that your story, your place in the world is insignificant, and that's not true.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And also sometimes just wanting to be heard as seen doesn't mean I want to be validated externally, right?
Mm,
And I think that's one thing I always try to communicate to people. Just because somebody wants to use their voice doesn't mean they want you to say, yes, your voice is approved. It's saying, you know what, I take up space. I'm
yeah,
allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to exist without explanation,
yeah.
right? And I don't need your validation for me to exist without explanation. So there are so many levels to this, and I think um, right now more than ever, I think social media is helping people show up to use their voice. So there are many good things about social media as well, but I think it's the part where people still need to work on. Personally, is just the always seeking the external validation
Mm,
that I'm not worth something if somebody else validates me. And I think that's what I keep fighting against, for people to see that, oh no, you're way more than that. Because remember, you're more than enough. And one thing I always say is if you keep breaking yourself into bits and pieces just to fit in different spaces, then you're broken into pieces. You're not
yeah.
enough.
You're not whole.
You should, you're not whole, right? So you as a person, your experiences are valid, your life is valid, you're more than enough. And if other people can see that, or if they wanna, you know, see you or filter you through a superficial lens, that's on them. That's on them.
But you know what? It also goes to show the importance of having a good supportive network around you, because sometimes it's hard to do that work for yourself because it can feel like a big heavy burden on your shoulders, especially if you're just being surrounded constantly. You're hearing the noise, and you can't help but internalize that. So it's so important to have people around you, friends, family, who can sit you down and be like, this doesn't, it matters, but it doesn't really matter, and you are
Mm,
much more than this, and just keep on going.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's so important that, family, friends, but also being kind of self-aware. You need
Mm,
to be able to be self-aware enough to know when people are doing this for your best interest. Because nowadays, because of social media, everyone is a narcissist. Everyone that doesn't agree with me is this. Everyone that I'm like,
yeah. But a
if
lot
you
of
would
it's
just,
but a lot of it
it's
is performative though, which is like my
right,
word of
right,
the month. It's so
exactly.
performative, and
It is.
I get more irritated by that. But I'm like, I can see through what you're doing. Like, where's the
Yes,
authenticity in it?
exactly, exactly. And also even when people actually have genuine feedback for you, it's like, no, they're jealous, no, they're this, they're like, so it's you have to be able to be honest and transparent with yourself
Yeah.
to say, you know what can you take back to self-improve? I am in the camp of what we call it the fixing the crowns behind the scenes.
Mm.
I am one of those where if my friends are doing stuff or if I'm doing something that's out of pocket, they call me behind the scenes, they readjust my crown and then they slap me and push me back out, right? They don't do that publicly. And I think we need that support network where you have those friends or that family members that will call you in, take sense back into you, get your crown straight, and then send you back out.
The world has such a funny way of moving, because I literally was having this exact same conversation with my best friend yesterday. And we're just talking about friendships in general, and how, like, as you get older, it's not that you learn, but you you really know which one of your friends are going to be the ones, as you said, they'll be behind the scenes fixing your crown, making sure the
Yes,
label's not sticking out the top of your dress, and then
yes,
pushing you out there who are ready.
yes,
But then you have the friends that who may have been around you for years and years and years and years, but they're not the ones who you're going to look for support. And if
exactly.
they do support you, it's like an exchange they're looking
Transactional.
for. Yeah, it's
Yes,
transfer I'm looking for. It's
transactional.
transactional.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to be around friends where you feel safe in different ways. And so this
Yeah.
might be a weird example, but I was recently in a kind of with a group of people where I had been talking with them for about an hour. We've been laughing, everything. And then I come home and I see that there was like something on the side of my mouth all throughout. And not one of them said, clean your mouth. As
Oh,
mundane as that is, that's what I mean is just there are people that will be around you and watch you do all those things and not say a word.
yeah.
And so you have to be, as you get older, I'm older as well. I'm more discerning. My friend network is really small,
Isn't
you
it
know.
weird how that happens? It gets smaller.
Yeah. It gets more because you just don't have time for bullshit anymore. You don't have time to
Yeah.
waste energy. You have to protect your energy. You just you can have friend acquaintances. Absolutely. You can have so many
Mm.
of those, but like your close friends that know all your business, you can keep that quite small. I remember there was one of my close friends. I was having an event. It was an exhibition. I don't think she knew I was having an exhibition. I just said, "Come, I'm doing this event from 5 to 7." So she just came. She was in the corner talking, and she's like, "Okay, so." And then at the end, she's like, "Okay, so what's going on?" I'm like, "Dude, look around you." So she had no idea it was my exhibition, but she came because I said, "Just come." So she's
Yeah.
just like, "Okay, hanging around, drinking, talking to friends." Like, "Okay, what's
Why
going on?"
why am I here?
So why am I here? But I was like, "I'm here because you called."
Oh, I
So
love
you
it.
want those kind of friends, right?
You
They're just
do.
like, okay, they show up and they're like, "Okay, what's going on? What's happening?" You want that kind of community that they just show up for you. So,
One of my friends, I love her to pieces. when I first when not the book I self-published, so The Jigsaw Man, which is obviously my crime
yes.
book, and she messages me, she says, "You know I don't like these sort of books. You know I don't read these sort of books. But because you're my friend, I will buy this book." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't care what you do with it, as long as you buy it. But that's the sort of friendship
Yes.
that I
Yeah,
value. She's like,
absolutely.
I'm not going to read it. I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. But I know you're supporting me, and I know that, yeah. And I'll see her like share stuff about my book. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I love her for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so funny because yesterday, because I just announced recently like a collaboration in 2 years where we're gonna go. I'll be leading like the first women only expedition to Antarctica with
Oh,
like a
really?
group.
Wow.
So it's in 2 years. You should come. You're gonna love it.
I'll
But
be honest, me
but
and Snow,
but
I don't know.
no, I think you love it. But the point I was trying to say is like a friend slid into my DMs and said, "Is it on my bucket list?" No. Is it because, but you're gonna be there, so I'll come? Yes.
Yes.
So it's one of those things that you're like, is it my bucket list? No, I don't need to be there, but because you
Because
are,
it's you.
then I will. So it's kind of the same thing you're saying where they will show up for you. And also, we also need to be gracious with our friends. Like we don't
Mm,
have to expect our friends to do everything. So like we have friends that will say, well, you're not liking my post, you're not engaging, you're not doing this. Well, it has to also make sense. I can support you in different ways, right? So we also need to figure out what's the best way our friends want to be supported and support them that way. And likewise.
I just think it's so I just think it's so true because I sometimes the support I need is not you liking every single post
No,
on
no,
Instagram. Sometimes the support I need might just be I'm texting you because I haven't heard from you. Are you alive?
yeah.
Have you eaten? What's
But
going on?
also, but also opening the door. I have a lot of friends that have access to doors or rooms that probably I need to be in,
Yeah.
but they like everything. They share everything. And I'm like, actually just open the door.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for me, I think means a lot more sometimes than just the content, the performative. See, I'm there
Yeah.
publicly for you when you can be the one to actually lift the load off my back. And that's one of the things I write a lot about or even talk about is if I'm not doing something publicly in a performative way, what am I doing behind the scenes that's making
Mm,
more of an impact in the person's life? Have I just introduced them to the editor? Have I just done this? that's going to make it easier for them than for me to just be publicly saying, oh, I like this. So those are the things that are always in my head that I think
Yeah.
about as well.
I think it's another way of asking, like, how can I be of service? Not only to myself, but to my friends and the people I care about.
Yeah, yeah. What's the best way? And like the older I get, the more I realize support comes in different ways. How you can truly support,
Mm.
just comes in really different ways. So
Before I go on and ask you about Bitter Honey, Lola, as I said, as I was trawling through your website, because you have a beautiful website as well. It's not even,
yeah.
you do. It's stunning. I was like, this is so good. You could spend all day on here. But when I was trawling through your website, I was looking at your non-fiction book. Have I pronounced it right? Probably not. Is it Lagom? Lagom?
Logan, Logan,
Lag.
yeah,
Yeah, and it was
yes.
the Swedish secret of living well. So I had a question. How do you live well?
How do I live well?
Yeah.
I'm minding my business and drinking my water. Staying out of drama.
That should be on a t-shirt. Mind my business and drink my water.
Drinking my water, exactly. No, but how do I live well? So one of the things that I love is because I'm a culture person. I love culture. I love getting beneath the
Mm,
nuances of culture. So I've taken the best of all the cultures that make up my life to create my own super culture, right? So I've taken the vibrancy of being Nigerian with the ambitiousness of being American, with the work-life balance of being Swedish to create my own life on what it feels like to live well, right? So how I live well is making sure that I am staying true to my craft, to my heart, to making sure I'm
mhm,
making space for that, to my loved ones, making sure I'm spending time with them, traveling, eating good food, making sure that I honor my feelings, whatever I'm feeling in any situation. I'm quite an idealist. I really am an idealist, and I think it gets me in trouble all the time. But also making sure that that's different than toxic positivity, making sure there's there's a clear difference between that.
yeah.
But honestly, it's in the everyday. It's in the I always say I don't have a long to-do list. I actually have just tasks for the day. I don't keep a to-do list because if something is due in December, then why is it on my to-do list if I don't have to start looking at it until November? It's just
Yeah.
giving me stress right now. You see what I'm saying? So I do not keep to-do list. I just keep kind of like microscopic views of, okay, this is what I'm doing this day
Snapshots.
or this week. That's
Mm,
it. So that also makes me breathe, gives me room to breathe. So in a sense, that's kind of what I do is curating the life that works just for me. I am not a big rubbernecker. I'm not looking at everybody else's life. I can applaud, I can look, I can get inspired, but then I'm not making it doubt my own life or my own choices. I own my choices, and then just live the life that I've kind of been given and I've
mm.
curated and do the best I can within it.
Okay. So I got another question before I go on to Bitter Honey. And this comes from not stalking around your website, but just
Okay.
perusing your website.
Yes.
So I saw that you always have a focus word for the year.
Yes.
And that your
Yes.
focus word for 2025 is manifest. But then you also said
Yes.
you're manifesting the soft life. So the soft life era. And I think I kind of wrote about this last month about Black women just wanting to live their soft life and not wanting, just trying to escape the perception that we always have to be strong and that life is always hard. We just want to live a nice soft life and post our pots in our cooking and what's growing in our gardens. So
Yes.
how is your soft life?
It's getting softer, it could be much, much softer,
It could be much
but
softer.
it could be much softer, but it's getting better in the sense that um I am honoring my boundaries.
Mm,
I am saying no more. I'm not having to over explain anymore of why I make the decisions I make. Um, I'm curating a lot more in terms of if this doesn't feel aligned with my purpose or passion, then I can support from afar. I don't have to be in everybody's business or in every space. I don't have to have an opinion on everything,
Yeah.
you know. So in a sense, it's getting softer, you know. We need the finances to match the soft life, the proper soft life. Then I'll be like, yes. So that's where we're getting to, waiting for that to fully match.
I think it goes back though to what we were saying in the beginning about intention. It's like setting the boundaries also matches with having that intentional life. And if you're not intentional about what you want and where you want to go, you're going to find it a lot harder to establish the boundaries around you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that's what I wish, for myself and for others as well. I think that's the dedication of the book, for those who have never known rest, may the soft life find you soon, is that it's okay to be taken care of and to be treated with tenderness. Because I think with Black women, we do not get treated with the tenderness that, say, white women get easily afforded once they cry. So I think that is one of the things that I want for us too, is that we need to be treated with care. We need to be treated respectfully. We need to be taken care of, because we too can break. One of my favorite quotes is a Swedish proverb that says the deepest well can also be drained. In Swedish, it goes, den djupaste brunnen kan också tömmas. The deepest well can also be drained. And Black women are pretty much the deepest well of emotions, of resilience in society. That too can be emptied out someday. So we need to be taken care of in every single way. So that is the era of my life right now. I'm in the stage of my life that I'm in right now.
I was going to say that it goes back to how Black women are perceived. I said that we can handle pressure. And you're a strong Black woman, so you can handle the pressure, you can deal with the hard discussions and the hard circumstances, and you're just supposed to just keep moving through it. But it's pressure builds like a pressure cooker.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the top will explode. Yeah, it will explode at one point.
Of course. And we can. The thing is that we need rest to recover. And I think society says we don't deserve rest. And I think of, for example, Kamala Harris. She's in a resting period right now. And people are saying, you don't deserve rest. Where are you? Come out. She deserves rest. But she can also handle the pressure, right? Yeah. So that's what I mean is, of course, we will always be able to handle the pressure. We will always be able. And I think in many lifetimes, if I came back, if I could choose, I would always want to come back as a Black woman, because that is the epitome of strength. But we need rest. We need to replenish. We need to be taken care of. We need to be. We can't be everybody's saviors. So that's what I mean.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Lola. Would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about your third novel, Bitter Honey?
I'll start by saying it's actually my favorite of the three so far.
Yeah.
Absolutely love the story. It's about a mother, Nancy, and a daughter, Tina. It's a dual, pulled in two kind of points of views, with Nancy in the 70s and 80s when she first moved from Gambia to Sweden, and her life maybe got derailed, but that's all I'm going to say. And then Tina in the early 2000s, who is a pop star representing Sweden. And the story is on Tina's side, who gets to be Swedish, who gets to represent the country. Are you enough? And then with Nancy, what do you do when your life gets derailed, and how do you get back on track? And so there's so many themes and issues in this book, but ultimately it's a story about resilience, about empowerment, about if life doesn't go the way you want, how can you pick up the pieces and then still make a beautiful life for yourself?
Okay, I've got two questions to follow on from your book.
Yes.
Did you face any challenges in writing Bitter Honey?
I think there's a lot of historical fiction, so the challenges was more making sure I was doing proper research and then
Mm,
weaving it into the book, in a way that felt organic, you know. While talking about really serious issues, I mean, I talk about nationalism and drug addiction and all of that. So that was where more the challenges were lying in terms of making sure I was doing whatever I was adding into the book justice and historical reference so that it didn't overpower the book, but actually made the book richer.
hmm. And if you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters in Bitter Honey, whom would you choose and why?
Actually choose the late Minister Olof Palme. So the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme was, he was assassinated. He was a real person, and he shows up in the book. So that is the person I will actually want to sit down with because I think he had a vision for what he wanted the country to kind of be in terms of integration and people feeling like they belong, you know. So that would be
Mm,
somebody I would love to sit because I know my other characters so well. I know Nancy so well. I know Tina so well. They've lived in my head for months, actually years, because they appear in other books. So, um, but I think that's one person I would love to sit with to get his view
I
on
always, I,
the life. Yeah.
mm, I think this is like one of my favorite questions to ask now in the podcast
Mm.
because I always find that the answer is never one of the main characters in the book. It's always someone different, some minor
Yeah.
character, someone who's just passing
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So that's the person I'll probably want to sit with and talk to. Because I know the other character so well. I know
Mm,
Lars so well because he is such a picture of most men, that and I don't want to give anything away because I want people to read the book. But that's the one character that I've been seeing all the reaction videos so far, and they're like, "Eh,
I
I
love it when
love
you
it."
get a good reaction video though to a character. You're like, you've done your job.
Oh,
When you get
yeah,
such a
really.
visceral reaction, you've done your job as a
Ah,
writer.
it's incredible. It's incredible. It's incredible. And I think for an author, it's just the best feeling.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that I don't want people to go away from my books just focusing on my prose. That's why I write the way I write. It's very simple, straightforward, direct, raw prose. I don't want people to go back and say, "Oh my goodness, Lola's prose." No, no, no. I want them to, at the end of the book, say, "I want to fight her. I took the book and threw it across the room." Like, what the heck? That's what I want as an author.
You want to create emotion. You want that.
Yes, yes, because that's what makes us begin to see each other.
Mm,
Because then you see the people as real people,
yeah.
and then you can connect their stories to other real people that you see, and then it can, it starts to create that kind of connection.
Okay. We've got your last set of questions now, Lola.
Yes,
Are you an introvert or extrovert or a hybrid of the two?
definitely a hybrid of the two. I love being around people because of energy and because I work as a travel writer. I love cultural connection. I want people to feel seen and heard. I think I'm just a natural, um, just being around people. But then I have to recharge. So I go away for long stretches of time. I'm an introvert that way. That's how I do my best work. That's how, even when I'm struggling, I lock myself away. I'm gone because um, people also drain energy. They
Yeah.
just drain energy, right? So that's some kind of a hybrid of both. A little bit more on the introvert side, but definitely like I'm around people and give them my energy as well. So
I, this isn't on the list of the questions, but when you're traveling as a photographer, do you find that people are more open to your presence because you are a photographer? Is that
no, no.
no?
On the contrary, they are open to how you carry yourself and present yourself.
Mm,
Because when you go as a photographer, people can immediately tell if the exchange is about them or about what you want. And I always tell people that if you photograph people, the minute you ask someone, can I take your photo? It's no longer about what you want, but what they are willing to give you of themselves. So that needs to come across in your energy as it's okay for them to reject you. You are the one trying to get something. And so they can say yes or no. And then people can just easily pick that up. And then just even calling somebody by their name already starts breaking down barriers because you see them. So if I'm just going to see somebody, just ask what's your name, then you call them by their name many times. That alone already starts to break down barriers.
Yeah.
So it's all about disposition, really. It really is more about disposition.
Okay. So what challenge or experience, good or bad, in your life shaped you the most?
Good or bad? I mean, so many incredible moments, from having my kids and my kids are, born here. So they are Swedish in a sense, but they are also mixed. And so seeing the world through their eyes and seeing the new challenges they have to face, that opened my eyes to a lot. That's why I do what I do actually, is to have these conversations for their sake so that the soil is fertile enough for them to thrive. So they feel like they're at home in their own country. You know what I mean? So there's that, but then also recently getting divorced as well. I initiated it, but not because for really bad reasons, but for when we stop evolving in the same direction. So sometimes the life you wanted isn't the life you got, or maybe this is the path life was taking you and then you get derailed. So how do you come back from that? So writing Bitter Honey was also therapeutic for me in a sense. Even though Nancy's story is not my story, it's about what if life doesn't go the way you planned? How do you come back from that and then get back on track and then create the life that's still meaningful and closer to where you're supposed to be? So yeah, there's so many experiences, but I would say just those two are really quite significant. Having my kids, which opens me to these whole new challenges of belonging and identity, and then getting divorced. That just says once life doesn't pan out the way you want, how can you then get back on track and create something maybe even more beautiful?
Yeah. So if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't work too hard and just play. Because, really, when I was done with high school, I was done with high school at 15 and started college at 16. I got my first degree at 19 and then just kept working. Yes, and I just kept working in the corporate world. I got a master's somewhere along the way. So my whole life in my 20s was just corporate senior programmer stuff. And I wasn't playing and I wasn't wild. And I think if I could go back to 25, I would say you have time. You don't need to feel like, okay, clock is ticking. Like just live your life, just enjoy yourself, and you don't have to be perfect all the time. That's what I would have told my 25-year-old, because my 25-year-old was living like a 45-year-old woman in a corporate C-suite. So,
like, I try not to have any regrets. I don't think I have regrets, but I do. If I could go back, I wish that I'd taken a year off in my 20s after uni. Like, I wish I'd taken a year off and just just did anything, because I did something similar in the sense of I went to school and then got my, did your GCSEs, did my A-levels, went to uni, got my degree, got my master's, got my postgraduate diploma in law, did another, did I do my, no, then did law school. And then I qualified, and then it was work. And I never, and between that, I said, I wish I'd taken a year off. That's the only, I wish I'd done that just for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, those pressures at that age were mostly external. I don't think if it had come from us fully, we probably would have been like, but there's always the pressure of maybe family or this or society or what you're supposed to be doing. So those additional things also add, to that feeling. But I think if we were just left up to our own devices and didn't care at that age what anybody thought, I think we would have done the things we really wanted to do at that age. So
definitely.
that's one of the things I'm trying to instill in my two kids is, there's no rush. Live life on your own terms and don't rush. I don't want to pressure you, so they can fully become like self-actualized and self-realized without that external pressure. So,
okay. All right, Lola, what is your non-writing tip for writers?
Non-writing tip for writers is switch medium if you can. And what I say is, because I can switch medium, if I'm stuck and I'm having like writer's block, I just forget it and I do other things, because other things open up a tap of creativity that lets me get back to the writing. So if you're kind of stuck, my non-writing tip will be just forget it and go play in the sun, go do other things. Like do you have any other hobbies? Go do that, because that's what actually then revives and gets you writing again.
Yeah.
And I say this with experience because I do all these different things, right? So if I'm stuck with writing, I forget it. I go do photography for like 3 months. That starts the creativity again and get back to the writing. So that's, I don't know if that's the exact answer you need, but that's a non-writing tip.
That is, it's a non-writing tip. It's definitely a non-writing tip. And
find something else.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's 100% good advice. Do something else. Take yourself away from it. It allows you to reset.
Yes.
Okay, so finally, Lola, where can listeners, because I've talked about your beautiful website, but where can listeners of the conversation find you online?
It's so weird because when you say Google me, it sounds so pretentious and
but it's just what people have to do. They need to Google you.
Because it's like, just Google me, I have this. No, it doesn't. That's not how I want it to come across. But honestly, I'm easy to find. It's just Lola Akinmade on most of the social media outlets, and my portfolio is at akinmade.com. That links up to all the other things I do. So I'm quite easy to find. Once you find my social media, then you can get to my mailing list and all of that, and all my business out there. So
just Google her.
I'm saying that in like the most humble, non-pretentious way. So,
Lola, that just leads me to say, Lola Akinmade, thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.